Hey, Amy,
Yeah, Juan.
give me that beat.
It's Baseball Shangri-La with Amy Cuevas and Juan Ramirez.
What's up, party people? Welcome to another episode of Baseball Shangri-La. She is Amy Cuevas and I am Juan Ramirez. Let's get some business out of the way. If you're listening to us on the podcast, on the audio portion, please make sure you're subscribed to the podcast, rate us on the podcast, write a review. This all helps us grow the show. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel, hit that notification button. Give us a thumbs up, leave us a comment, and make sure you're following us on our social media on X at BB Shangri-La, on Instagram, Threads, and Twitch at Baseball Shangri-La. We're going to start the show the way we always start the show with base running blunders. Amy, do we have any base running blunders?
No, I saved you when you thought you were tripping around the bases, and you actually picked yourself up, dusted yourself off, and there was no base running blunder. So Dodger Stadium does actually have the largest stadium capacity in the MLB.
Awesome.
Congratulations.
I love being perfect. It's tough. It really is.
You're right. You were
I'm
right.
sorry, what? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
You were right.
My headphones suck. I have a really hard time. What are you saying?
You were right.
It's amazing to me. Every time you whisper, it just sounds so perfectly clear. So thank you for that. Amy, let's start with this. The starters for the Korea series have been named. And
I see what you did there. Let's start with the starters.
hi, hey man, the Dodgers are going to be soul men. Soul
I'm
men.
a soul man.
She's
This
up
is
there, soul man.
this is why we're not in a band.
This is why we had somebody to do our theme song.
Thank you, AJ. You saved us.
By the time you guys are watching or listening to this show, the Dodgers basically, their Cactus League has ended. They have no more games in Arizona. They're getting ready to go on a plane to Korea, and they're going to have two exhibition games before they play the two games against the Padres. What I thought was interesting, did he bring this up while you were down there in spring training, Amy, when Dave Roberts had said that they had consulted someone about sleep patterns, preparing them to go to Korea? Did you hear about this?
I didn't, but I heard them talking about it during. Oh man, now I've got them confused because I was rewatching yesterday's game this morning, and then I watched today's game. So I don't. They bled over. Maybe they were talking. I think they were talking about in yesterday's game. So they did bring
Yeah.
in a sleep expert, and they're working on having the guys kind of not blow their schedule completely.
And this is going to be, I do feel bad for them in this sense where it's going to be they're going to be discombobulated. Before I guess maybe now it's because I'm just getting older, but I never thought jet lag was a thing. But now if I fly from coast to coast,
Oh, fancy! You never
oh, very,
suffered
very,
from jet lag.
well, that's right. Jet lag is a thing because now when I fly from coast to coast, there are times where I get off the plane and I just want to just go straight to bed, and I feel like I need to sleep it on. And then the next day, I'm ready to go. So I can't imagine these guys flying out to Korea. Not only are they going to play games that count over there, but then they're going to fly back to here, and then it's like, hey, we have more spring training games, and now it's like, okay, get revved up again and let's go ahead and start this. Look, I
And
don't.
and just for everybody who's not aware of the dates, in case you don't live off of a calendar, the MLB calendar like I do, they are leaving on the 14th and they're returning on the 21st. So it's not like just a couple days over there. They're going to be there for a week. So just enough to mess up your sleep schedule and then come back and play those three games against the Angels and then start against the Cardinals the following week.
Yeah, and I'm sure it just sucks for the Dodgers. They're going to have to start their season this way. At the same time, I understand that, again, the opportunity for growth in Major League Baseball is all international. So I understand them doing this. Maybe looking back, Amy, I would, but there is no perfect time to do this, right? Because if you do it during the middle of the season, I feel it messes you up during the middle of the season. So maybe having it at the beginning of the season and just getting out of the way is the best time to have this series.
I know we always start the season with the exhibition games, that freeway series against the Angels. I'm just wondering, like, in this case, if you're going to do something international, would it not be better to wipe those games off if they're just spring training games and they don't count for anything? Maybe those are if you are going to do an international run, give the players those games back. Like they don't count towards anything. Let them get some rest.
I think that's a good suggestion, actually, on your part.
Oh,
So
thank you. Thank
you're saying,
you.
see, don't ever say that I'm not nice to you. I try to throw compliments your way. So the Dodgers named their starters for the Korea series, and so starting game one will be Tyler Glasnow, and he'll be facing Yu Darvish of the Padres, and then in game two it is going to be Yamamoto versus Joe Musgrove. I will say this, Amy, I am surprised that they didn't go with Yamamoto versus Darvish in game one in Korea, but I will say this, based on performance in terms of spring training, Tyler Glasnow deserves to get the opening day start.
100%. But I was also looking at it too. If you are playing, 2 games in Korea, it might be better to split those up though. So you have Darvish, playing on the one side, and then you've got Yamamoto on the other. So you're spreading that out so that we can showcase the Asian players and give them their due and their audience instead of cramming it into one game.
Again, you're much smarter than I. Yes, I mean, look, these games were already sold out, so it's not about an issue of draw. I just thought it'd be a really interesting matchup: the countrymen versus countrymen in Korea. Who knows how many Japanese fans are going to be in that stadium? Because I know tickets were very hard to come by. But again, the way Tyler Glasnow has pitched is on Tuesday, he went 5 1/3. He gave up no hits. And the last two outings that he had in spring training, he clearly, I think, was showing signs that, hey, I'm ready for the season to start because I think he's looked great all spring. Yes, that first outing against the Angels, um, he was not as dominant as he's been the last two outings. And that was really, he was just missing location. But I
He was
think
getting revved up. And to your point about seats being hard to come by, I just looked it up. The Gocheok, I hope I'm not butchering that, Sky Dome in Seoul, Korea, only holds 16,744 people. So coming from 56,000 at Dodger Stadium, that's going to be a smaller crowd for some of these guys to play in front of.
and to also put it into perspective, crypto or Staples, as most of us know it,
Staples.
seats more than this stadium where they're going to be playing. So it's going to be I think, an exciting environment. Are you ready to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning to watch that game, maybe?
I'm ready to get off work, take a long nap, and then set my alarm to get up early. And then I will probably just go straight into work since I start early. So it's going to be a
Perfect.
long couple days.
You have it all planned out. But again, I think, I honestly, to tell you the truth, I thought Yamamoto would get that first start, and
Really?
then and Glasnow would get at the beginning of spring training. I thought
Okay.
when that series was announced in Korea, I thought, oh well, Yamamoto will get the start in game one, and then Glasnow will pitch game two. So I was surprised by the fact that Glasnow was named the starter for game one. But again, I can't argue. He has looked really, really good in spring training. And I mean, that game against the Giants on Tuesday, I mean, he was filthy. I mean, the way he was really hitting his spots. And if he has that kind of control, I know a lot of Dodger fans that I talk to feel they're expecting a huge season from him. And it, it's amazing how talented that guy is. And I think some people look at it as he's under the radar because Yamamoto's the one getting all the attention, and I think all the expectations are for Yamamoto. But I'm expecting huge things from Glasnow, and I could see Glasnow being the Dodgers ace towards the end of the season.
Well, and considering he's coming off of that surgery too, where he had those couple of years where they didn't really know fully what was wrong with him. And so now that he's had that fixed, he got to prove himself in the latter part of last year. I think this really is his season to shine and show what he can do. And judging by what he's done in spring training, like this is just the beginning, like you said.
Yeah, I'm very excited about that. I know they haven't made it official yet what the roster is going to look like in Korea, but we do know some players that are going to be traveling to Korea, but we also know some other players that aren't going to be traveling to Korea. And I know you being down at spring training, Amy, they gave you some of that information, right?
Yeah, and Dave Roberts actually broke it down because some of the media had questions about that too, about okay, what's going on with these numbers? Because you're starting the regular season and then you're backtracking to exhibition angel games and then you're going back. What does that do to the roster that they're carrying? So they get to carry 31 players over to Seoul, Korea. The roster will have 26 active players on it, but I think he was saying something along the lines of like they could pull from 29 for those games. And then when they come, when they start the regular season, everything will kind of balance out again. But Gratterall is dealing with some shoulder soreness. He has some hip issues, so they're slow playing him right now. Just to be careful, they haven't done any scans, but he will not be going to Korea. Emmett Sheehan, who we already know, was dealing with some shoulder soreness as well. He actually threw a bullpen on Sunday. He is supposed to throw a couple more bullpens with players, but he will also not be going to Korea. Paxton will not be joining them. And then Trinan, I think I don't know that they've necessarily announced whether he's going or not. I assume he probably will be, but it was announced he also had a bruised lung the other day. So for all those reports, he took a comebacker to the ribs on the game on Saturday. He ended up not fracturing anything, but it was a bruised lung. It's going to take about 3 to 5 days to heal. So he was, I think he played catch on Monday, and then Wednesday he's supposed to throw another bullpen. So as far as we know, that's kind of the situation with some of those guys. And then Trinan, I don't know. Have you heard if he's going to be accompanying them on this trip?
I think they're still waiting to see how he recovers. Were you at that game on Saturday when he took that comebacker?
So I was, but I was actually getting ready to go back into the clubhouse to interview some of the main players that were at the top of the roster that were going back in. So I heard it happen, and I actually got some pictures afterwards on my way out of the stadium, not realizing what had happened of the guys waiting around for the next pitcher to throw. So the pictures I have are post Trinan taking that comebacker. So
It was funny because when I saw it on TV, and of course, I'm going to sound like a complete dick here. I was just like, "Oh, it doesn't seem like it was that bad." But then later on, when I saw, well, initially when he got hit, I didn't think. But then when I saw
when
him
he
go down,
rolled, when he took you saw him grab his side and then he rolled.
it's when he hit the ground where I was just like, "Oh, damn! Like, where did that hit him?" Right? Like, there's been times like when they get comebackers, I feel like, they get up like this and it goes off of like their bicep or something like that. So then when I got the report that it was a lung contusion, I was just like,
And I'm like,
I mean,
how did he not fracture anything and just got the lung contusion? And I love Dave Roberts' quote. I wrote it down somewhere because we were actually in that scrum when he said it, and a couple of us giggled. But basically, like he didn't dodge a baseball. He actually dodged a bullet. Because nothing, he didn't fracture anything. Like, what are the odds with something like that?
I'm going to give you a story of my elite athletic days when I played men's softball. And I was playing in right field, and this guy hit a line drive right back at our pitcher, and it hit him square in the chest, and you heard it out in right field, the thud. And then
Were you collecting daisies?
I was. I play right field. It's important, You got to learn how to catch. You got to learn how to throw. That's why I play right field, where the
This is our musical
dandelions
episode,
grow.
everybody.
Thank you, everybody. 2 shows nightly at the Pacoima Hilton. No, but
Please
I
tip
tell
your
you,
servers.
it hit him so hard it sounded like a large thud, and he stood there, and then all of a sudden he collapsed. He just collapsed in the middle of the field, and all of us just start running towards him, right? And after that, I'm just sitting there going, "Wow!" Like it's amazing that nothing else more, happened to him. And yeah, I think we also take for granted the number of times that it happens in Major League Baseball and how many guys, except for the guys who take shots to the head, right? The ones that take shots to the head, you're just like, oh my God, he's dead. He's dead,
Mhm.
right? But I think we're so used to, like, taking off the leg, or they take it off, the shoulder or stuff like that.
Rub some dirt on it, walk it off, and I'm just like,
Right.
"Ouch, I bumped into my table and I've got a bruise." Like, "Ugh, no."
So that's why, like, when he initially, and because like Trenton's also like a really, he's a tough guy, right?
No,
So,
we
but
just got him back. We need to put him in bubble wrap.
well, they have to put everybody in bubble wrap. I mean, how many times did Muncie get hit during this spring training?
Wasn't it, like, twice in 2 days or twice in the same game or something? Like,
Like
I
he
can't
took
keep
one off,
up with all these games.
like he took one off the wrist, and then he took one off the knee. So, yeah, so I mean, we also know that, like, James Paxton is not going to travel, and that makes sense because they're only playing 2 games out there. Now, the thing is Bobby Miller is going to Korea because Bobby Miller is going to pitch in one of those exhibition games. So, again, those are the things that we have to factor because, well, I mean, I guess these guys could stay back and get their work in Arizona on the backfields, on the minor league fields. So, why the
I think
Dodgers are
Joe Kelly
deciding.
was just pitching in a minor league game. I think I saw something on Twitter earlier today.
Yeah, so the fact that they're choosing to take Bobby Miller to go, get his work in over there, I don't know, maybe Bobby Miller was just like, "Look, I've never been to Korea. I wanna go to Korea." Like, how many of these guys are like, "I wanna go, because I want to experience this whole thing." And maybe James Paxton's just like, "Hell no, man. I'm perfectly fine throwing here, getting my work in on the backfields, of Arizona."
Dude, that time I only had an hour difference when I flew to Arizona, and that was kicking my butt. I going across the ocean, no. They were saying it's like I think like a 14-hour flight or something. I can't remember. I think we were talking to Bobby Miller about it in the clubhouse and all the guys have their different ways that they're going to deal with it. Some can sleep on a plane, some can't. So the fact that the Dodgers brought in a sleep expert, they're all gonna do the best that they can to get over there. And I think even Rick Monday and Tim Neverett were talking about some of the tactics, like, hey, make sure you change your watch, when you get on the plane. And so these guys are going to be as prepared as they can be.
So you mentioned Bruce Gratterall's not making the trip because he's already feeling some discomfort, and you had mentioned Emmett Sheehan, which we had not seen all spring. Injuries, Amy, injuries. This to me is the biggest concern for this Dodgers team going into this regular season because the greatest indicator of future injury is past injury. And a lot of the guys that the Dodgers have signed are guys that are coming back from injury or have a history of injuries. There has been an article in The Athletic that Ken Rosenthal wrote in regards to this recent rash of injuries that have taken place in Major League Baseball. Acuna of the Braves. I don't even think we've gotten an update yet in terms of his knee. Have we, Amy?
I don't think so. I haven't seen anything come up recently. To be honest though, I was in a time warp this whole weekend, so news was intermittent. So you probably be the better person on that.
Well, and then of course the most recent one that happened with Garrett Cole of the Yankees getting an MRI, and last we heard they still have not given an update on his situation there. Is he going to miss time? How much time he's going to miss? That you read that article, right? That Ken Rosenthal wrote in the Athletic.
Yeah, it was Ken Rosenthal, and it's either Saris or Saris. But it was basically from the perspective of the Rangers head team physician, Dr. Keith Meister. He's one of the guys who pioneered a hybrid elbow procedure where it combines the traditional ligament reconstruction with the addition of an internal brace. But essentially, the whole article is just talking about injuries to pitchers, and he credits it to the advent of the sweeper and the power changeup for the spike in the numbers. There are other people who disagree with him, but what everybody did agree on was essentially that the higher velocity that pitchers are using, it increases the risk of injury regardless of the pitch anybody's throwing. And as you're probably the better judge of this, but we know velocity has been the focus over the last several years. The focus is on stuff versus what it probably used to be. What were they throwing in like the 90s or early 2000s? Were they touching like 100 like some of these pitchers were? Or were we a little bit lower in that miles per hour?
Well, I mean, it is the velocity has definitely increased because you have a number of pitchers now. Look, back in the day when I was a kid watching baseball, if someone hit 100 miles per hour, you were just like, "Oh, he just did something impossible." It's like, oh my gosh, he hit 100 miles per hour. Now it is routine for these guys to hit 100 miles per hour. You have
Wasn't there
certain
some stat even with Major League, like they were saying that Charlie Sheen's character was seen to throw like upper 90s, but like pitchers at that time weren't actually throwing at that speed. So when you're watching the movie, there was this element of it not being quite as realistic. And then now that's actually where we're operating from, is
right.
like you said.
Well, he is Wild Thing, I mean, they called him Wild Thing for a reason.
He makes
But
my heart sing.
well played, madam. Well played. But that's the thing, right? Like pitching is already an unnatural motion, right? And so to put that much pressure but I think a lot of it also, and I think the article goes into it, or maybe I'm confusing the argument here,
Throw a
but
stat my way. I'm ready. Throw a stat my way.
no, but I've heard other baseball people also say that these guys are too big. Too big, meaning like they're too muscular. Like they're also, and which is interesting because both Gavin Stone and Walker Bueller have put on weight and weight in terms of muscle to help them get through the season. But I've heard some baseball players, because of course the perfect example of this is you look at someone like Greg Maddux, who was just, they called him the professor, was his nickname. He was a Hall of Famer, and he was not, and he wasn't built like this Greek god, right? And the guy ended up winning 300 games, and it was all about his control to help him win games. So, but then you have freaks of nature. You have guys like Nolan Ryan, who pitched well into his 40s and was still throwing hard. So you could say that maybe the argument there is mechanics. Like if you are mechanically sound, you know, you can go ahead and pitch with more power. But then again, a guy who was known to have like perfect mechanics, dreamlike mechanics, was Mark Pryor of the Dodgers, and his career ended because of injuries. I think pitching is just one of those things that is just this freak occurrence that nobody can. I mean, poor Dustin May, right?
Or the
Go ahead.
guy who pitched yesterday for Cleveland. I'm looking at his stats right now. Tristan McKenzie, Tim Neverett, and Rick Monday were talking. He's 6'5", weighs 165 pounds, and this guy was like, he pitched pretty well in the game. I think they held us. I think that's the game we lost yesterday, wasn't it? Like 5-1, 6-1, something like that. Yeah, 5-1. But he pitched a couple innings, and they were talking about his wiry frame for being so tall and only weighing 165 pounds. But his delivery was making it work. The article did cite kind of what you were just saying. There are 3 risks for injury. So effort, and a lot of that does tie into the velocity, the amount of pitching, and the mechanics. So those things are going to be the drivers for injury. They're saying that they're seeing a lot of that in like how kids are coming up in some of the youth leagues. So the question is, they threw a lot of stats out that I thought were really interesting. One of the ones was when you initially got a Tommy John, you were typically good for the rest of your career. Now with the way that we're pitching, you might be good for 7 to 8 years. Or not now, but that was like as it transitioned. And then now in the now times, um, a guy might be good for 3 to 5 years before they break. Like, that's not great. So at that point, if this is what we're training kids to do, and the majority of them are coming up, so they were saying that it's more common for pitchers to be drafted with a history of elbow reconstruction, which didn't Walker Buehler have one in high school? He had Tommy John
Yeah,
before we
and
got
I
him.
not it was in college.
Yeah.
It was coming out of Vanderbilt.
So from 2011 to 2013, there were only 6 pitchers drafted who had elbow reconstruction versus 2021 to 2023, there are 24 pitchers. And that number is potentially going up. So is it incumbent on the MLB, who does have, they're doing interviews right now. They might be creating a task force to look into, like, how do we keep these guys from breaking? Not just for the game. The question is, do we need to continue focusing on velocity? Or are there other factors, the mechanics, other things that we can look at to save these pitchers essentially from themselves and from the game? Because it just feels like we're kind of using them up and then, like, all right, well, this one's, we wrung him out, let's bring in the next one. Is that fair? Or do we look at changing the game so that we're not ruining these guys' bodies?
You know what? And it's that's a really hard question to answer because I think it's all about philosophy. What do I hear a lot of times from Andrew Friedman is, especially with relievers, they are looking at guys that miss bats. They like guys that can get strikeouts, right? So I think there is this mentality from the pitching side. Well, how am I going to get a lot of strikeouts? Well, if I throw hard, now that's not all of it because you definitely need movement on your pitches because these guys are major leaguers. You could throw 100 miles per hour, you could throw it at 101, but if you're throwing it right down the middle or over the plate, these guys are good enough that they're going to time you up and they're going to hit you. But I do think it would require a philosophy change. I mean, but I've heard stories of high school kids playing baseball in high school hoping that they get their Tommy John out of the way in high school so then they can go through the minors. And by the time they get to the major leagues, they're good to go. And to me, that just seems something so I couldn't wrap my head around it, Amy, because when I was going to school, it was unheard of to have any kid have Tommy John. And
Well, and
the
if
other
it's
thing,
only good for 3 to 5 years, if they're making their way up through the majors and they had that surgery in high school, that's not even guaranteeing that that surgery is gonna hold by the time they make it to the majors, if they make it to the majors.
yeah, and yeah, I mean, you had mentioned a reference in terms of frame. And, that's the reason why the Dodgers traded Pedro Martinez. There was this belief that he was too small, that he would not survive a career because of his frame and how hard he threw. Look, I think another perfect example of this was Tim Lincecum with the Giants. Like Lincecum, I mean, this guy, it was a Cy Young Award winner. He had a lot of success in Major League Baseball, and I feel like it was short lived. All of a sudden, after a while, he just couldn't pitch anymore, and a lot was made about the amount of pressure that he was putting on his body with the force of his windup and his delivery. So I feel this article with The Athletic poses really interesting questions. I just don't know what the solutions are other than the fact that you're either someone who has really shitty luck, and I would put Dustin May in that category, or you're a freak of nature like Nolan Ryan, who you can avoid major injury and have pitch into your mid 40s. I mean,
But
Sandy
don't you
Koufax.
think maybe there's a correlation to how they were pitching then versus how we're pitching now? Like, it's not like it's reversed, like, Ryan's the one who, like, petered out after a couple years and, had to have surgery. Like, Dustin May is pitching in the now times where we're having all of these issues. I
Well,
don't
I
think
think,
Sandy Koufax, to your point, I think you were just gonna bring him up. I don't think he would have lasted as long as he did, and he even cut his career short if he was
yeah.
pitching in these times with these, like, one of the examples that they used was, um, previously, guys were told to throw the ball like they were throwing a raw egg and not, like, don't squeeze it. And now they have a death grip on it. Like, they're squeezing the ball so hard to flex all of their muscles as they're getting ready to throw, and that's creating tears through the muscle. And so that's a change. Like, do we continue to go down this road, which again goes back to another conversation we had a couple weeks ago about do we shut down the amount of pitchers that we have to try to increase the innings that the starters are going? Well, you can't. If they're getting injured at this rate, you can't just take away a pitcher and then hope that changes the game for the better. We have bigger pictures, bigger questions that need to be answered. And to your point earlier, it is a fine line. But if people are getting hurt, I think it bears us looking into that and finding a better answer, even if that is, you know what, maybe velocity isn't as important as it is for saving these guys' bodies so that they can pitch 162 innings versus being pulled out. I think one of the teams in the article, I can't remember who it was, I'll have to look it up. They lost 3 pitchers last year. Like this is not okay.
Well, and they mentioned Driveline in the article, and I think institutions like Driveline, I think, are very interesting because that's what they're doing, right? They're studying this, and I think they do need to look at alternative methods, look at different philosophies. I know everybody is just fascinated by the fact that Yamamoto throws a javelin, right? And that is a new method in terms. Yeah, let's look at what the Japanese pitchers now. Also, the Japanese pitchers usually only pitch once a week, so there might be a theory to the fact that maybe in the states they do throw too many innings or they do throw too many pitches. You could ask Fernando Valenzuela, if that had any effect on his career. But I
And
do think that
maybe that is the change we make. Maybe they pitch farther apart, they can go deeper in games, but you can't take away a pitcher at that point from the roster. You've got to give teams more depth to be able to do something like that, to your point.
Yeah, so of the factors that they listed in this article, I think it's all of them. I don't think it's one or the other. I don't think it's just the velocity because there was a pitcher, there was a manager of the San Francisco Giants in the late 80s, Roger Craig, and he was basically known as the godfather of the split-fingered fastball. And so a lot of pitchers on that Giants team would throw the splitter. And I know after a while, people stopped throwing the splitter because of the pressure that it was putting on their arms, and there was a fear of there would be injury there. And then Tony Gonsolin started throwing the splitter, and he got a lot of success with the splitter. And look what happened to Tony Gonsolin. So I am curious, but then again, Yamamoto throws a splitter,
But we're also waiting to see how he transitions to US baseball.
Right. And so that's what I'm saying. It's like when you say, okay, let's not focus on speed. All right. Well, if you're not going to focus on speed, then movement is going to be very important. Right. So you need pitches that are, and you had said in the article, right? What were the 2 pitches that they were seeing were causing a lot of injuries? The power changeup, and then what was the other one?
So Dr. Keith Meister was saying the sweeper and the power changeup, but there
Right.
was opposition to that, saying that that's not. Other people disagree that that's not
Right. And that's why that's my whole thing. And it's like they're very interesting questions that are posed in this article. Again, the author is Ken Rosenthal, and I forget the other gentleman's name.
Saris. And to your point about the driveline baseball study, they were saying that it's stress on the elbow per mile per hour on the pitch is higher for secondary pitches. So even though there is opposition to Dr. Meister, Driveline study is basically saying changeups and sliders, there is more stress on the elbow. So they do have some data backing that up. And they use Jacob deGrom as the example. So if a pitcher throws his slider as hard as his fastball, that's going to put more stress on his elbow. And some teams are like, well, then we're just we're gonna get that pitcher, we're gonna use him for all this stuff, and then we'll go from there. And some pitchers are like, as long as I get to pitch. So I think it's endemic within the entire game of maybe it isn't just velocity, but it is the entire methodology around pitching. Something has changed in the last couple years. We are seeing an uptick in injuries. We should probably address that, and some things might have to change.
Yeah, I found the article to be very interesting. So if you guys if you have a subscription to The Athletic, I know I've been getting a bunch of ads that, I could get it for $1 for I don't know how many months. But
That's how I have it.
Yeah. So, I mean, they do write some very interesting stuff. And like I said, I thought the article was interesting. I think it asked the right questions in terms of the solutions or some of the conclusions that it comes to. I don't know. I think it just all goes back to the fact that just throwing a baseball, especially pitching repeatedly with anything, if you do something a number of times, the repeated motion, there is going to be wear and tear. I don't I don't know if you can avoid these injuries, but you bring up a very interesting point in the fact that it is now a shorter and shorter span before a pitcher gets hurt, and it didn't seem like that in the 80s and the 90s, but again, we also have a lot of access to a lot more information now. So maybe this stuff was happening then and we just weren't aware of it. But look,
They
if you guys go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say they did throw out another stat that he said basically that teams increased emphasis on velocity and stuff. The IL placements for pitchers rose due to that. So in 2010, there were 240 cases of this. In 2021, there's 552. So, I mean, that's essentially doubling the days that pitchers spend on the IL, based on some of this data compared to even just from 2010. So the numbers are there to back it up. They just need to figure out what to do with these numbers now. Meister said he repaired approximately 230 elbow ligaments last year, and he's way ahead of that pace this year. So there's
Wow.
something to be said for that.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's crazy. I like all this talk. Like I said, it worries me because I really feel one of the biggest obstacles the Dodgers are going to deal. And look, and we've already seen it with injuries are always a part of the game, but I injuries to key players could completely derail their
Mhm.
season, and it's something that I'm always waiting for the other shoe to drop when the season starts because it's part of the game.
Hey,
But
we got through last year on duct tape and pitchers. Like, I don't even know how we did well, I do know how we did it, but, like, Tony Gonsolin pitched injured half the year, so did Kershaw. Like, it's not ideal. I'd
yeah,
rather these guys were healthy.
but I don't want to go through that again, Amy. I don't want any excuses. I want them to be at, as much as they can be at full strength and
Same.
hopefully win this. I don't want to be able at the end of the season to sit there and go, oh, if so and so would have stayed healthy, or if this would have happened. And like I said, I know right now Yankee fan is super worried about if Garrett Cole goes down because if Garrett Cole goes down, that alters their season significantly. Not only that, but there's reports of Aaron Judge nursing something. So, and the
We're
season hasn't
putting
even started yet.
incredible wear and tear on these players' bodies, and this is not where I shine, and not that it's gonna be a base running blunder. This is more just a question I can go research, but how I know we increased the number of games. So does that factor in too to this? Weren't we at like 140 or something at some point, and now we're at 162? So it doesn't sound like a lot, but that's extra, it's just more wear and tear on the body as you're hopefully working towards the postseason. But these guys, like you said, they aren't just going out for 2.5, 3 hours of a game and then calling it a day. They're out there practicing, throwing bullpens, they're on the field running drills. So this is a constant day in, day out thing that they're doing to their bodies.
And it's almost year round. There are a
Mhm.
lot of the players, you hear them, they say maybe they take a month, two max off, and then they're training again. So
Didn't
they're
Miguel Rojas play in another league in the offseason? He
he
went
plays winter
from
ball. He plays winter
Yeah,
ball in Venezuela.
so he went from our season to that season to spring training.
Yeah, but you bring up a question that I've heard a lot in terms of do they play too many games? And it's not just in baseball. That same question has been posed in the NFL. It has been posed in the NBA. Do they play too much? And that is unfortunately that's where capitalism comes into play, where the owners they're not going to want to give money back, right? It's like
And the
in
players don't wanna decrease their salaries because that's where
yeah.
the owners are gonna go. There's actually an article in The Athletic from earlier, in the offseason about this, where they outline all of that, the financials and why it doesn't make sense to lessen the number of games because players don't want a pay cut and owners don't wanna pay them. I'm not gonna still pay
Yeah,
you for 162 games if you're not gonna play them.
yeah, and then again, I think those are all valid points. They're all valid questions. I just don't know the solutions, and I think institutions like Driveline and of course having more information, I think will help. But I don't know if this is a problem that has a solution, to tell you the truth, because injuries have always been part of the game.
Yeah, but I think that can be said, and this may be controversial or not, but that was what people said about football before CTE was a thing. And it's like, no, this is actually impacting players. And my friend just brought this up today when we were chatting. She's like, the Will Smith movie, like everybody thought that guy was crazy until he wasn't. And so, yeah, can they continue to play like this? Like if I'm a player and I sign up and I'm like, sure, I may only get 3 to 5 years off this arm. We can try to do it again. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. They're consenting to it, but, like, at what point do we say, "Hey, this isn't humane," or "We should just make a change so that, you're not killing yourself doing this, and we can still better the game just in a different way." That I think that's some of the calls that we need to make because wearing people out faster, to me, personally, doesn't seem like a good option when we could explore other avenues.
Absolutely. It's a fascinating topic. I'm glad that we were able to talk about it on the show. Before
Curious
we
what
wrap
you
things,
guys think too out there. So if you guys have ideas on this or, you guys have read anything or researched anything, please feel free to share it with us.
yeah, throw some comments if you're listening or watching us. Before we wrap things up, Amy, any last words?
Spring training's over. I'm sad.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're going to have the freeway series, but it is fascinating to think we're finally here. We've been talking all this time, and it's like I feel like spring training went by fast. I
It
really feel
did.
it's especially the Cactus League. I just feel it went super fast. But next week we're going to be talking about real games. The Dodgers play next Wednesday for real. That game counts, folks. So I am very much looking forward to it, looking to see what that environment is like. So, again, as a reminder, if you are listening to us on the audio portion of the podcast, please make sure you're subscribed to the podcast, rate us, write us a review. If you're watching us on YouTube, subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit that notification button, give us a thumbs up, leave us some comments about the episode, and follow us on social media on X at Baseball Shangri-La, on Instagram, Threads, and Twitch at Baseball Shangri-La. Did I say Baseball Shangri-La for X? It should be BB Shangri-La on X, guys.
Catch yourself. Maybe, maybe not. I was kind of listening.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to find out who's really paying attention on this show. She is Amy Cuevas, and I am Juan Ramirez. You have been listening or watching another episode of Baseball Shangri-La. Amy, say goodbye to the people.
Goodbye, people.